Well, Sarah, to start, this is a beloved book, the source material, and Elizabeth is very much a beloved character, and you had the task of sort of establishing the visual look of this series. Talk about what the collaboration was like with Lee Eisenberg, the showrunner, who's seated up here. Um,
Ow!
talk, surprise. What was that collaboration like?
Blame him if this didn't live up to the book's amazing standard. I mean, it was one of the most joyful collaborations of my career. He's truly a visionary. When we first spoke, he had such a clear interpretation of the book's central themes and really had a clear vision for how to bring such a complex story to the screen. It's not, as most of you know who have read the book, it's not like the simplest plot line. It's really as varied and complex as life, and Lee understood that really deeply and was incredibly generous about allowing me into the writer's room, and I felt like he and I got to really lock hands as we discovered the story together. And he really trusted me to build the visual world, which was such a thrill. And my main goal visually was for people to be able to just get lost in this world. I wanted it to feel like a contemporary story, even though it's set in the 1950s. I didn't want it to feel like a glossy stereotype of a 1950s catalog. I wanted it to feel real and human and messy at times even, and have some grit to it. And so it was a lot about finding that tonal balance between some exciting, bold, stylistic choices and really grounding it in character, so that we were hopefully swept away and too involved in the character's journey to even stop to notice some of the cinema choices.
Well, the series opens with Elizabeth Zott, like already a well-known TV star of Supper at 6. Did you reference any specific cooking shows of the time while sort of creating what that world would look like, the show within the show?
I'm sure our brilliant production designer, Kat Smith, probably did. To be honest, I didn't. I think all of us wanted this to feel like its own thing rather than a riff on something else that was exactly in existence. So, but I really want to credit Brie Larson, who is also an executive producer, along with, clearly the star of the show, for having some key insight when it came to that, the key set piece of Supper at 6. I think she had seen the first design of it, and the kitchen was too beautiful in a way. It actually was too much like a dream kitchen for a cook. And she said, like, Elizabeth Zott needs to feel like this is hideous and so not her. And in fact, the opposite of the kitchen she designed for herself. And I think that's when Kat was like, all right, we're going pink.
Well, seeing Brie Larson embody Elizabeth Zott, when you see it stretched over the 8 episodes, it seems like such a spot-on choice. I'm curious for each of you, what's a moment of watching her embody this character that really stood out to you, that this is what she brought to this role? Millicent, let's start with you.
Wow, that's a loaded question. Because Brie brought life to this role. What's amazing about Elizabeth Zott is that she is at the same time very unemotional, but emotional. She is someone who has flaws, but strives for perfection. And everything that embodies her embodies Brie. And Brie brought her to life and gave her humanity and gave her a soul and a heart. And in Brie's hands, Elizabeth's quirkiness was something that was, entertaining and lovely, and you understood why people fell in love with her. At the same point, she was also very strong, and the strength came from her inner faith and belief in herself, and everything about that is who Brie is. So I think we would not have been as successful as directors if we were not working with Brie Larson.
Tara, how about Brie as an executive producer, as you're sort of capturing her on the screen, but also getting her input behind the scenes?
Yeah, I mean, like, Brie is a ninja. She is so smart. She shows up so prepared. She was like an incredible person to have to meet her bar every day. She always knew if I was bringing something smart that she hadn't thought of. She always knew if I hadn't thought through something that she'd already thought of. She, there were certain scenes along the way that in real time, I did the last 2 episodes. And as we were sort of like landing that plane, there were certain scenes where there were just question marks. Does this still work? Does this still feel right, considering what we've shot and where we've been? And I think the best thing that I found was that collaborative push and pull that you always have on a set was so juicy and so real and so present with Brie. And you just had to be on your A game because she was on her A game all the time. And that's what she brought as an actor and as an exec producer to the show.
Well, and Sarah, in the second episode, you're dealing with heavy subject matter. We see the assault that she experiences back at UCLA. What was it like shooting her and getting her input on that scene?
Well, Brie is such a professional. She can, just in general, before we talk about that scene, she has this ability to go to really emotional places as an actor, and then you call cut, and she's able to put on her executive producer hat and talk to you generally about story, about whatever needs talking about. So that was just like, she has that extraordinary ability. And that scene in particular, I think we both felt very strongly that you never want to include sexual assault in particular in a female character's backstory just to make them interesting. Sometimes it becomes this like knee-jerk substitution for personality, like just add a trauma, and now we'll understand everything about them. Yeah, exactly. Now she's complex. And so we were really sensitive to the fact that, first of all, if we're going to do this, we're going to film this, it should be horrifying. It should take your breath away because it's a horrifying thing that happened. But also we really wanted to get at beyond the physical assault itself, it was an emotional betrayal. It occurred doing the thing she loved most, which is science, and she thought she had an equal partnership with this this person who was her intellectual sparring partner. And so we were even in talking about that scene, we were also just thinking about how does that reverberate at every moment. And I think it's what Millicent said that I really agree with, which is she's a character who is at once very strong and very vulnerable. And that's a tough thing to play. And Brie was able to, there's a way in which that assault could have happened, and then, okay, she puts the trauma behind her and now she's strong forever. And that's just not real. Like, we carry everything that has ever happened to us with us for the rest of our lives. And Brie was able to carry everything that ever happened to that character with her. And that's why by the end of the season, it's such a triumphant performance, because it just keeps building on itself.
Well, Elizabeth is somebody that's navigating a male-dominated field and, experiencing the barriers and limitations that come with the sort of gender politics at play. I, for one, have never been on a panel that looks like this. So tell me a little bit, yes, applause. Could you relate to what Elizabeth went through, and how did that shape or inform
Not at all.
your approach to the themes that this series tackles? Bert and Bertie, let's start with you.
Oh my goodness. Well, obviously we can't relate at all. Unfortunately, it does relate hugely to what we're all experiencing at the moment in the industry, and this kind of change within the industry. Unfortunately, these themes are still very prevalent on a daily basis. We directed under our nicknames, and turned out that people viewed our work as men, so we got meetings. And we would walk into meetings and people would literally say the words, "You're a woman." And so we started realizing that they'd viewed our work as men. And we'd got jobs because they thought we were men. And only then did the penny drop that, oh my God, this is still happening. So, you know, unfortunately, reading these scripts, reading the book, you almost can't believe that we're still going through this very similar situations today, especially when it comes to the sexual assault. And this series manages to tackle that in a way that when a story is really powerful, if you can still entertain, but yet bring out these really important issues that we need to discuss. That's when I know for myself as a storyteller, I have to get involved. And then you find out things like, oh, all women directors, Brie Larson in the lead, these kind of changing the way that stories are told. And so that's why this is relevant. That's why, one of the reasons why I had to get involved. And I'm sure all these women here as well.
Millicent?
Well, actually, when I interviewed for this job, and I remember talking to Lee about this, I had said that the thing, and I did read the book, the thing that really drew me into this project was that she was strong and that she was a survivor, and that in an industry that is sort of stacked against you as a female, that you're able to stand your ground and succeed and survive. And as a female director, I have lived that and I have gone through it. So I understood the emotional journey that Elizabeth was going through, and I really felt drawn to bringing that to life.
Food is obviously an essential element to the storytelling, particularly the visual look of it. Elizabeth is somebody that is making a lasagna 78 times. God bless her. So talk to me about, your working, Sarah, let's start with you and then we can bring it to the others. First, establishing what you wanted the food grammar to be like on screen and what you wanted it to function, and talking with Courtney McBroom, the food consultant. Am I getting the title right? Food designer?
Yes.
Okay, I
the
wanted
Food goddess.
high and
goddess?
mighty food consultant.
But talk about working with her to sort of make the food look appealing and appetizing and accessible.
We wanted the food to be really delicious, but we also wanted it to be part of the storytelling. And I think what's really interesting about Elizabeth Zott is she's ahead of her time when it comes to 1950s cuisine, which is not necessarily American 1950s cuisine is not necessarily the most appealing. But what's really interesting in terms of storytelling is that, in World War II, women were leaving the home and supporting their families, and then all the men come back from war and they're told to get back into the kitchen. And there's this kind of almost malaise for having lost this other side of themselves that they had access to. And in particular, this is a middle to upper middle class white lady malaise in particular. But I think a lot of the 1950s cuisine was designed to be convenient. Like, oh, now you can use the microwave, or you can, here's the Jell-O mold. And so it was like, how can you feed your family and then also have some other aspect of your life? And I think what makes Courtney's choices so inspired is that Elizabeth Zott is someone who's working on a budget. She has to cook for a week. It has to be practical. She doesn't have a lot of time. And she managed to, I think, present, hopefully you guys felt this on screen, that it's very practical and very accessible, but you still drool a little bit.
Well, look, as someone who struggles to capture a good food photo on Instagram, I don't know, can you talk to me about the challenge and the art of shooting food? Tara, let's start with you. Walk me through how many shots it takes to get that one good one.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I didn't actually get to see the middle episodes when I started shooting, right? Because they weren't ready. So I could see dailies, but really I was looking at what Sarah had set up in these first two episodes and thinking, we don't have time for that. So
Yeah, pretty much.
there was something too about the evolution of Elizabeth, that whereas Sarah's Elizabeth was precise and controlled, and everything was just so, and the shots carry that. The Elizabeth that I was landing was a much more fluid, tactile, sensory driven person. So our approach was very, very simple. I think we got 2 cameras up. They both moved all the time. We were able to shoot in 90 degrees and 90 degrees, and so we had a lot of leeway, and it was very smooth. And we did that in wides with Bree, and then we brought Courtney in. Now you're gonna know all the secrets, you guys. We brought Courtney in to do just the detailing, but really Bree was quite good. She was making fresh pasta and was doing this whole thing, but we did it so fast and so continuous. So my Elizabeth was in a flow and in a zone, and smelling sauces and tasting things and not measuring so precisely. And that was our approach to our food stuff, which was really fun.
Any horror stories for others?
Horror stories.
Come on,
From the food?
From the food.
I don't think we had horror stories. It was kind of a pleasurable experience
Okay.
shooting food. It's very.
I really want to make a bechamel.
I
That's
had
the thing I
oysters
haven't done
and
that
they were
yet.
horrible,
Okay.
and they smelled bad, but they looked good, and yeah, that was.
I got a horror story. I just remembered something.
Seafood on a warm set with lights is never enjoyable.
What's your horror story?
Something just came back to me. We were like trying to make our day, and I needed, because my Elizabeth was very precise and everything had to be very measured. And there was like one more shot before we were going to go into overtime. And so I like had to get it where I needed the meat on the scale to like be measured in an exact way. Like raw meat, and I'm a vegan, so this was like a little unpleasant for me, specifically a horror story for me. But we were running out of time, and I didn't have time to be like bringing in, the food stylist. So I just had to go in with my bare hands and just keep adding more meat to that shot until we got it right.
Took one for the team.
Yeah.
Did it for the art.
Oh my gosh. Okay, we're gonna move on from food to animals. A very beloved character in Lessons in Chemistry is Sweet Dog 630, who's played by the amazing dog actor Gus. Gus.
Good old Gus.
Okay, before we get into episode 3, Bert and Birdie, for everyone, had you worked with an animal before? Or was Tara's nodding her head?
Yeah, I did a big episode of a broadcast show that had a dog that had to get shot and held and lay with a tube in his mouth, and he did great. But you never know. You just never know. You dream big, and then you never know.
So, Bert and Birdie, we got an amazing episode coming up next week. For readers of the book, you know that you get the point of view of 630 throughout the series, and we'll get a little bit of that in the 3rd episode, just to tease you guys a little bit. Talk about the challenge of making that feel grounded and not like a little silly.
I mean, what do they say? Don't work with children or animals. And episode 103 is 630's episode, pretty much. And episode 104 is all about babies. So we had a great time. But it was, I don't know, we just were like, how do we ground this in 630's world? So like keeping the camera low with him experiencing, I mean, it's an episode, as you now know, about grief. And so we see a perspective on grief from this dog, and it's incredibly moving because we just, we treated 630 as one of the lead characters, which he is, but just to like put the camera low. I mean, he's a pretty big dog, so it's not that low, but like be in his world, and you're hearing this amazing, don't want to give too much away, but this voiceover and the guilt he feels, and at the same time we're experiencing Elizabeth's grief, and it becomes this beautiful two-hander episode that doesn't feel silly because we're seeing inside the soul of this animal. So it was a very beautiful experience, challenging but also beautiful.
And he'll be voiced by BJ Novak, which is really cool. Sarah, we saw this final shot, and Gus gave a tremendous performance. How many takes did it take to get Gus to really bring it home with that?
I'm trying to remember. Should I just say one take? One take. I'm trying to remember in that particular shot. I'm gonna go with 7 if we're being honest. But honestly, it's almost, you guys just watched this like really intense thing happen, and now we're like up here under bright lights talking, and it's like I almost wanted to give you guys like a transitional moment to just like, I'm glad in a way we get to kind of process together for a second, because we really, we thought very deeply about how to handle that moment, and I think we wanted the death to feel as surprising and merciless as possible, because that's the kind of thing that life deals you sometimes. Sometimes someone is here and then they're gone. And the book and the series is so much about the unexpected, about the things you can't predict and plan for. And so it is very brutal, but I also think it's very real. And we wanted to, we then are very clearly like floating towards 630, who is the only witness to this tragedy. And I feel very strongly that it's often the non-speaking characters who say the most, actually, whether it's, babies or people who are unable to speak for some reason, or animals. Often they actually have the most wisdom. And so I thought that, we just wanted to pass that off to then Bert and Bertie's really beautiful episode on grief.
Well, before we wrap, is there a moment during production that maybe took you by surprise?
Brie Larson with a sledgehammer
We
in
get
the
demolition.
kitchen. Yeah, knocking 7 shades of shit out of a kitchen counter was pretty epic.
Melissa?
There's no
Well,
kidding.
there's a lot of things. I mean, I felt really at home with this crew, and as a guest director on a show, I mean, it speaks to the family that Lee created and that Brie created. That on Halloween, I dressed up and I directed in a onesie, and the entire crew dressed up, and it was an amazing day on set, and we had such a lovely time. But aside from that, one of my best memories is, you'll see later on in the episodes, there is a young actress named Alice who plays opposite of Brie, yes. And she's amazing. And the two of them together, the warmth and the love, to see them when they weren't on was just the light of my day. And Brie would stay on set, and there's a scene in a diner where the two of them were up all night, and they never lost the zest for life and the love for each other, and it so shows on screen. And it's a moment that I will never lose. Alice was losing her mind because we had a kid up too late, and we were all like, what is wrong with her? That's always so calm. But it was wonderful, and she's just one of the most amazing young actresses I've worked with.
Her mother's up here.
Tara, anything for you that was surprising or stood out?
Look, I mean, it was truly like I really fought for this job. Like, I got this book and I was like, let me at it. And I love Lee and am a huge fan of his work, and was very honored to step in the footsteps of these giants. But I very specifically remember shooting our very last shot of the show. And I mean, without giving it away, it's all about Brie's performance. And Lee was at some faraway monitor, and I was watching, and I always call cut too early. And so I'm watching, and it's perfect, but I like don't call cut because I'm like, it's so perfect, and I'm not going to call cut too early. And I see Lee like kind of in front of me, just like thumbs up, and Brie's like, good? And I'm like, hey, cut, like it was just this wonderful moment. And I remember thinking, okay, we landed the plane, we got it. And that was my whole goal, was like coming through this was to honor all the good work that Lee laid out, all the, incredible work that Brie had done, everything that these ladies had done before me to just land that plane. And I hope we did that. You guys will see in November when it airs.
Sarah, do you want to add anything before I wrap it up?
I guess for me, this whole job was the most beautiful surprise. This was not something that was expected for me. You asked, how we as female filmmakers might relate to this character. I often kind of feel like a chemist in a pink kitchen a little bit, where I'm like kind of a weirdo nerd, but like, you know, get tapped for so-called, now we need a female director for these female stories. And so in a way, I think I came to this job with a great deal of skepticism, actually, dare I say. And I feel in a way like my heart was opened very similarly to the way Elizabeth Zott's was. It turned out to be so much more of a beautiful, joyful process. And I guess I'm just really grateful. I feel I grew as a person. Like I also learned something about staying open to the unexpected and to change.
That's the perfect way to wrap things up. Just as a reminder, the first 2 episodes dropped Friday. And if you check out LATimes.com on Friday, I'll have more with Lee and Sarah talking about the show. So be sure to check it out. But otherwise, thanks for coming to our first Screen Gab screening. It was great having you all on a Monday night, school night. It was great. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.